The panel we're going to bring up is working on what AI can actually do to the science, the biology, and infrastructure underneath this healthcare system. So 4 people with 4 different bets. I'm excited to bring Vitalay, Nyamitse, Kerry, and Tim to the front of the room here. So I'm going to start with the fact that AI isn't new. 10 years ago, when I was diligencing companies for the New York Health Department, AI was just a tag in a spreadsheet, and it was not the one that even everyone was most excited about. It was just a category that was already half a century after the term was coined. So when I look at what's happening now, my first instinct is, what has changed? You know, in 10 years, all of a sudden, this term gets people excited, it gets people yelling, there's a lot going on. So for you specifically, as founders and as scientists, what's new, what's shifted, both in what you're building and in this research, that made this the moment to bet on AI?
I can go first. Oh, is it? Can you guys hear me? Okay, cool. So I've been in healthcare AI for over 10 years. I was the first data scientist at Amgen. And so when I was at Amgen, we were really excited about AI. And we were using a bunch of techniques across the entire value chain of Amgen. And then today, my company is a developer platform for healthcare AI. And our customers are building all sorts of workflows on different healthcare software systems, extracting data from unstructured healthcare data. And many things have not changed since 2016 at Amgen. And many things are different. And the things that stay the same are healthcare enterprises are scared of new technology, are focused on data security, compliance. Some of those concerns have only increased in concern over the past 10 years. But what has really changed is the overall healthcare system's eagerness to adopt new technology where there's an actual impact. I think 10 years ago, there was fear, generally speaking, but we didn't have enough examples of how it could make an impact. We would talk in theoreticals. We would say, like, in theory, this should help us accelerate our time to market, or in theory, this should help this patient. But what we started to see, particularly, I mean, we have to give OpenAI credit for this, making technology accessible to anyone on the planet opened a lot of folks' minds to what's possible. It wasn't just a scientist who's building something that never reaches an output and that has to go through governance. It's almost like the technology escaped the lab, if you will. And so I think that made it kind of forced organizations to reckon with the cost-benefit trade-off, the risk-benefit trade-off. And so I think, we are always, what has not changed is the risk has always been there, and it is only increasing, but the benefit actually has been unlocked. And I think that that's one of the most exciting things about being in this space.
My turn? All right, perfect.
Yeah, let's hear from everyone on this one.
I don't think this is working, so I'm just going to put this there. Just to give you a little bit of background of what my perspective is, so I come from the dark side pharma. I've been at Roche Genentech and other places, so I'm going to provide you a little bit of that perspective. So I think one of the major reasons that it's time to bet for AI are very practical. Pharma is scared as shit in a way, because both from China and from the technological side, you actually have a lowered entry barrier into this field, okay? So you have a lot of technology coming out that you can really quickly potentially bring something into the clinic that was just not available before to smaller companies. Now, I believe also that, and it's nothing evil. Again, I'm coming from pharma. I never met an evil person. Everybody there is actually working to provide medicines to patients. I don't want this to be taken as, oh, there's this dark force trying to prevent something. But and I'm building on top of what you said. I would just want to say something that is newer. And so I agree with everything you said, and I think you hit all the cores. But the way that drugs and everything are being developed is changing in a tectonic way. And for me, the reason I chose to work on what I work today, which I guess we'll discuss maybe a little bit later, is I wanted to look at what is the source of the problem that trickles down on everything, including ICD-10 codes and everything. And it is really our lack of, almost complete lack of understanding of biology itself. Period. I mean, that's the source of everything, if we think about it, is our lack of understanding. And I believe this is the precipice of the capability of technologies that we are able to actually start learning biology and apply it in a proper way. So I think, again, pharma, at least, is scared shitless of losing its market, and then the other part is perception. So there's multiple incentives that are aligned with multiple stakeholders that creates the perfect storm.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nyamitse-Calvin. I am the co-founder of Vital Audio, and we leverage voice as a vital sign. And when I think of AI, has anyone ever heard of the word, phrase, revenge of the idea guy? Yeah, so like previously, prior to like AI being in place and so forth, most of the ideas are just like concepts and you cannot really test them. The revenge of the idea guy is that the opportunity that AI presents is really allowing us to really test the limits of like what we already know, what we don't know, what can be possible and what is potentially not possible. So it's opening up avenues to not only just test, but also validate and explore different opportunities. So when I think of AI, I think of that component of like the revenge of the idea guy. Now, there's different layers, and I think like when it comes to healthcare, I have been in the healthcare a little bit over a decade now. Worked as a first responder, transitioned to clinical research, then biomedical engineering, and prior to building Vital Audio was actually at CityBlock. And we were literally leveraging technology at its infancy to really open up access to care, especially for patients who are remote. How do we actually reach them? How do we expand that reach of a patient who is 45 an hour away and make sure that they feel like they live within the city limits of being able to access care? So and I feel like with AI in the healthcare system right now, where we are and where we're heading, it is becoming more and more apparent that the adaptation process, like physicians are very bought into some of the process. Your CMOs are also bought in, but there's a limitation in like the trust supply chain, where I feel like the breakdown becomes from the lowest credentialed people, where we're not really actually encouraging and enabling them to actually being able to explore this. So, but these opportunity with AI allows us to now bring a lot of these things that we are just conceptualizing into application and testing and exploration. So, yeah.
I'm Tim Martens. I'm a heart surgeon in the Northwell system, and I'm working with a group trying to build the next generation kind of personal health record that's uCTRL. I have a PhD in biomedical engineering too, and I went bench to bedside with cell therapies back when people thought they might actually work. I think there's two major forces at play. The first was touched on, the problems in revenue cycle management, the bloat, the overload, the inefficiencies. That's not unique to revenue cycle. Every aspect of medicine has been built that way for the last 70 years, so that the reason it's 20% of GDP is there's 100 different parties with their own self-interest taking a tiny piece of the cut, whether it's in drug development, device development, bedside care, billing, payer, it doesn't matter. For the longest time, people have lived off the inefficiencies and built billion-dollar businesses around them. I think because of HIPAA and the regulatory environment, the FDA, that structure of payers, health systems, providers had a stranglehold and a vested interest in keeping things inefficient, bloated, and awful. AI, particularly LLMs, AI's been around for 50 years, but it's the accessibility of it. The widespread deployment of ChatGPT and Claude and all these tools have empowered the end user the patient who used to sit outside the system, unable to affect change, unable to get their claims approved, unable to deal with things, to find their own medical advice, to find the guidelines, to find the rationale behind why they should be doing what they're doing. And they can do it outside the system, so they don't need this bloated edifice. And I think just like pharma is scared, the health systems are scared because they're faced with this technology that's literally going to tear them apart. On the one hand, if they rush to adopt it, they get handcuffed by the very systems they built to maintain that monopoly. HIPAA, privacy, data security, like they put all that infrastructure in place, and now it's preventing them from innovating and moving forward. And yeah, so the technology is going to eat them, and the sooner it happens, the better.
That's great. I think all of you have different points of view, and I have a lot of questions, but I do want to be mindful of time. So I'm going to prioritize 2 answers per question. But if you pass on a question, you need to answer the next one. So that is how we're going to play. The next one, I think a few of you alluded to this, that Gen AI has made things different, both because, Vitalay noted that ChatGPT has made it accessible and known to everyone. People now kind of understand this concept, which has brought it to the forefront in a way it wasn't there before, that maybe less technical people now understand there's opportunities with this technology, that they weren't even familiar with how to ask those questions previously. And you also noted, Tim, that on the healthcare side, that has allowed for patient access. And I think, talking about those different stakeholders and what AI means to them is interesting. But I think in healthcare, these LLMs are turning out to be problematic. Is there a point where staying current with the latest technology stops being a competitive advantage? This is what's new and exciting, supposedly, maybe. But when does that start becoming noise in building what matters and can actually work? Is there a class of clinical problems where LLMs shouldn't be the primary decision maker or decision layer or tool? I know, Kerry, you had big thoughts on this.
This is like one of my favorite topics to talk about. So I think there's been some jokes on the internet recently where folks are like, I replaced my LLM with a series of if-elses and I saved cost and latency by 100x fold. One of the biggest problems that we hear from our customers who are building really impactful healthcare software that needs to make an important decision for a patient or for a clinician is non-determinism. And LLMs fundamentally, from a mathematical perspective, are not designed to be deterministic. And that's actually part of the benefit, is you're getting the ability to adapt to different scenarios, to be able to handle various edge cases. And so for us, we have actually adjusted quite a bit of our foundational architecture to be a hybrid approach of both traditional ML systems and NLP with LLMs. So we're leveraging LLMs where they're really good at, which is working with the initial, I would say the first layer of processing unstructured data, images to text, or being able to format a series of text into subchunks. But anything past that, we're using predominantly traditional ML-based approaches. For many years, I would religiously pay attention to new papers that were coming out. But more and more recently, my favorite trick in the book has been to look at techniques that were really popular 8 years ago. Because a lot of the techniques that were super popular back when I was first doing ML, as soon as we got GPT-3 out, we were we're just going to forget about XGBoost. It didn't matter, even though it's explainable, interpretable, high performance, cheap to serve. We're just going to forget about it, and we're only going to do LLMs. And so, and I, for one, I include myself in some of the folks who went on the hype train, because I started to see some of the techniques that were coming out of Google, and they were beating some of the approaches that we had built previously. So I was like, you know what, maybe nobody cares about explainability and determinism anymore. Turns out in healthcare, that never changed, and it's actually a major competitive advantage. And so I actually find us more reaching for older literature or finding techniques that work well in other domains and repurposing them, and that's something that we keep coming back to again and again.
he's grabbing it. He's
Yeah, sure. I can go, or you can go, whichever one. You can go.
So again, just as a perspective, so just to give you a little bit of background as what Numenos does. So what we are is really an AI deep tech lab that uses novel architectures to develop drugs and bring into market. And what it really, really means is that what we've understood is that in order to do that, since we, again, as I mentioned, don't understand biology at all in a way, is we don't follow the literature. We actually are creating the literature. So our way of dealing with that is we are creating absolutely novel architectures to deal with the biology itself. Because again, let's be honest, everybody here will be or knows a patient. And I have a little bit of a selfish motivation of keeping the people who I really, really love, which is my family, alive. And I had the absolute, again, whatever luck or whatever the destiny has called it, I have the opportunity to actually coalesce a bunch of people who are AI experts in order to create new ways to try to distill the physics equivalent of the physics laws for biology. And if you solve that, that is, I think, the only way to really move forward in understanding and developing drugs in a new way and developing new biology. Because again, let's admit it, when I was in pharma, this shit doesn't work. Like 90% of our drugs fail for the past goddamn 20, 30 years, and it's getting worse. So if you believe in correlation and not causation, the more data you actually have less success, right? In a way, if you really think about it. So I'm a real huge proponent of for example, Jan LeCun's view of LLMs are fucking amazing. I mean, if you think about it, and the way I like to think about it is that they are underhyped but oversold. Okay, so they are amazing at many, many things, and they increase the productivity of my AI team in ways that I cannot have predicted. But on the other hand, applying this to biology, it's stupid in a way. Be very honest, right? We tried it. It's not that we didn't, and it doesn't make any sense. So for us, the way we keep up with things is actually we ignore the literature and we create our own architectures in order to solve a problem that I believe is that we really don't have the equivalent of the physics laws for biology, if they exist, right? And I'm totally open to the fact that they don't. But creating tools in order to explore it is kind of what we do in developing drugs. So we don't keep up with the literature, we actually try to ignore it completely.
I'll let you go just because you reached for it. So you seem hungry to answer questions.
Yeah, so I'm going to second the first speaker's, Kerry Weinberg's opinion. Like, I don't think, especially even with building regulatory products, that's another place where people a lot actually get a hiccup. How interesting things are, does it really change the outcome, or does it really change? Is it actionable? If it's not actionable, then it's just interesting. So anyone who has actually gone through even FDA, you actually know that doing the coupling, like, hey, a single product, let's say you're using we use signal processing. If we couple it with an AI, that is another extra 8 months of actually us doing the work, validating it, and actually it creates a lot of steps and stagnation. So instead of you progressing at the speed that you really need to, you have to actually really evaluate what is really interesting and versus what is really actionable. Does it really help you become a better product, or does it really enhance your solution and the outcome for your customer? If it doesn't do that, it's just another feature that you're adding, and it's probably going to slow you to actually get into the market as well. So that's my own opinion, and I'm speaking it from like an experience of building like within a regulated space of like a medical device and then pushing it into the FDA.
Okay, so related to that, so we were here just speaking a little more philosophically of how we approach AI, keeping up with the research, bringing that to your companies. So if we're getting concrete, what from recent AI or health science research has actually made it into your production right now? Like, what's the most recent change you made, or what got cut because of what Nyamitse is saying, that in healthcare, sometimes what's doing most current or exciting is going to stop you from getting into market, or it's going to slow you down because of the regulatory component. So has staying current been a liability, or what has recently made it into your product? So whichever side of that coin you want to answer. And I know Tim didn't introduce himself this way, but he's also an investor. So I'm curious, when you're evaluating those products from both a clinician and investor standpoint, what you're looking at.
Yeah, so I mean, we went through the early phase where, you know, it was like the .com era. You said, I'm using AI to XYZ, to flush your toilet, to do your whatever it was. You got funded. And then there was this period where people realized, okay, we just pumped your valuation up to $150 million. Not only do you not have revenue, but you've got maybe a diagnostic with no lever to affect outcome. And so very quickly it went from, you know, it's great to use these tools, but unless, and this was echoed, you know, a couple minutes ago, unless whatever you're building can be tied to something very, very concretely measurable, a readmission rate, you know, a blood marker, a decrease your reintervention rate, decrease complication rate, something that is very clearly tied to a financial ROI that's measurable. You're praying that someone is buying your dream, and it's becoming more and more difficult to sell that dream without those outcome measures. And that's independent of what platform you're building on, what tools you're using, whether you're current or 25-year-old product, it doesn't matter. You have to convince people that adopting your technology is actually going to make a difference. And that's harder than it sounds, because there's a whole bunch of, well, if we do this, the secondary and tertiary downstream effects are X, Y, and Z. The C-suite of the hospital, the CFO, they're not measuring tertiary downstream effects. Your hypothetical ROI, because 5 years from now there's going to be a reduced rate of something, isn't going to fly. It's what are you going to do now, and how do you prove it?
So the way I divide AI in my company is the following. So there's efficiency and there is efficacy. And again, it's a field specific. So efficacy is how successful are we at delivering drugs? What's the error rate, success rate? And then efficiency is, as everybody mentioned, there's like, okay, how fast do you write a protocol? How fast do you recruit patients? How fast can you do these most annoying tasks that just shouldn't exist in our technological space, right? So on the efficacy side, as I mentioned before, I'm not going to elaborate and I'm not going to bore you to death, but we are building our own techs, like architectures, blah, 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 AI. On the efficiency side, which is each company's also has to take care of, especially startups, we've implemented many of the tools that we have today to write code faster, to think about things faster. How can we annotate data sets better with less error rate? So there's a huge jump on the efficiency side for us that we are implementing more recent technologies. But again, as I mentioned, in my domain-specific area, the efficacy side is where we use that efficiency to drive faster efficacy.
Oh, I have a research to prod example. I can sneak it in.
Quick.
I'll say it fast. I'll say it very fast. In the FAST Healthcare Interoperability Resources Data Standard, there's an approach in it called the International Patient Summary. And the idea is you should be able to go to a doctor anywhere in the world and have a quick summary of your entire health record and something a clinician can digest. Turns out that's very helpful for agent context engineering. And so this is an example where we took something from research to production that actually isn't from AI, but we repurposed it for AI purposes. And so one of the APIs that we've shipped end of last year is supporting developers to be able to do context engineering using the International Patient Summary, which is FHIR compatible. So you can pull data from an EHR, compress it into a human readable natural language summary that's based on the standard that is supposed to be designed for clinicians anywhere in the world to have a summary of your health information.
I have to say this. I'll say it'll be quick. In the pharma world, on the tech side, outside the hospitals, efficiency is a real metric you can measure and utilize. Within the healthcare space, it's a little bit of a bait and switch. I'll give you 2 examples. In the clinic, you can improve my techs, my medical assistants, the clinic docs, you can improve their efficiency and say your 15-minute visit can now take 12 minutes so you can see 20% more patients. When you actually go to measure how many more patients get seen, they see the same number of patients. My bathroom break gets longer, I have a couple more cups of coffee. I'm serious. This is real world. This is why efficiency, and a lot of the early tools for promoting efficiency turns into bullshit. Efficacy is what matters. So if your efficiency product shows me a 20% increase in the throughput of the clinic, then I'm a buyer. But few and far between that can do that. Yeah.
So we were talking about guardrails and what actually matters in healthcare, so that is a good segue to something I wanted to get to today. Whether you're moving to agentic autonomy in a clinical context, or you're looking about clinician adoption and what actually matters over there, even if you build something that's rigorous and that works and might be validated, clinicians can still refuse to use it. And so ultimately, even if that created that efficiency internally or it's based on the latest science, what's the adoption blocker you didn't anticipate, and how much of it was a product or technical problem versus a change management problem? It seems like you all want to talk about this. You're all smirking, but only if you're not long-winded.
Okay, so
I'll give up.
all right, so from a healthcare perspective, just being one of the person who has actually been within the system and also has actually had the opportunity to look outside the system. When we actually tend to do discovery and engage hospitals and clinics, we really focus on only the decision makers. We focus on talking to the physicians, the practice administrators, the CFOs, the COOs, the CMOs, and then we actually don't do enough homework to actually speak to the lower credentials, your MA, your nurse. A lot of things that actually can be pushed into application and use into the healthcare system, we forget that there's other gatekeepers like nurses. If the nurses don't like it, you're not going anywhere. That's the end of the line. So you have to be mindful of also not just looking at the very top of the funnel, but who's actually sitting down using your technology, typing that data into the system, who's actually going to be sitting down and reviewing that data and making sense of that data. So we tend to actually always forget these lower credentials, and we actually think that they don't add immediate value, but they are actually the true gatekeepers when it comes to how fast can you move. If the entire funnel is actually asking for you, you have 10 times the chances of actually moving that much faster. But you have to be mindful. So that's my only thing. It's not always a workflow or how rigorous you are. It's actually being really inclusive in the process. Your product is not just solving a one point. It's not just for one single place. You're trying to solve a system issue. So what does that look like for the lowest credentialed person in the clinic? You have to be mindful of that too. Yeah.
Yeah, I would echo that. I would group all of that under workflow. The workflow is an end-to-end process with 20 people. It's not just the physician, or C-suite can say we're going to buy that product, but if the physician on the front line's I don't need ultrasound, I'm going to do this by landmarks, you're not going to get adoption. Same thing. If the bottleneck isn't the procedure, but it's getting patients through the pre-admission testing area and then onto the procedure bed, and you haven't thought about that part of it, you're going nowhere. Perfect example. medical waste, when you waste narcotics, you need the nurse that wastes them and a second nurse to witness the wasting, and that all gets documented and logged. Someone built a brilliant technical solution that was a cart with a camera, computer vision, that watched the waste, verified that the amount wasted was accurate, and whatever. You can say that's going to cut theft and fraud and abuse to almost zero. They've raised $20 million and are trying to raise again because they get zero adoption. Why? Because they modeled one cart in a 25-bed unit that sits in the back room of the closet, and all the waste happens in the room. And you're asking nurses in an ICU to now leave their patient, find a second nurse, go to a room in the hospital that they don't go to, and video themselves wasting this stuff because corporate Northwell said we don't trust the machine, we still want the second nurse verification. So you've got a perfect technical solution but doubled the workflow and didn't engage the stakeholders you needed. So, I mean, the lesson being, it doesn't matter what tech you're building and how brilliant the team is and the architects and the back end people, if you don't have members end to end from that workflow guiding your development, you can build something that's a brilliant technical solution that gets zero adoption.
And I think that speaks to, there are some questions or really answers you don't understand until you see it yourself. That you just, I think there's a disconnect in the vocabulary between the clinicians and the technical folks, as well as the business folks. And oftentimes who you're selling to, as we know, isn't who's actually using your product. And it surprises me. And I think this has changed with AI. And I'm going to make a nod to the grunt work for before I had an LLM. And in my first job in health tech, the small startup for patient engagement in Medicaid populations, I sat in the community health center and watched the patients of what they were doing, how they interacted with the observers. I spoke to the care managers. I looked at every single click they made on their screen to understand how we could make that better. And I think with LLMs, people think you could skip that step in the discovery process. And I highly recommend we don't lose sight of the grunt work that's important as we're building with technical tools in healthcare. And I think, it's where we earn our stripes is by getting our hands dirty and understanding how to use the technology correctly, to Tim's point, to actually create value. You want to say something to that? I'll let you say something.
Just a very quick anecdote. So when we were in Atsuka and we're trying to do digital biomarkers, and some company like Samsung have won the the best price of having that watch that monitors people's whatever the hell it is, right? And then we saw zero adoption, and we went to the patient and we were like, we give you a free watch, you don't have to pay for it. And they go, well, actually, it looks like a Apple bootleg, and we're like really ashamed of this shit. Like, we're not going to wear this crap. Give us Apple things, then we wear it. So it's just those really crazy, human, beautiful, but heartbreaking moments that you sometimes don't anticipate. And I think that kind of sums up the some of those unanticipated roads and where we're trying to change things. Anyway, it's what rose up to my
I love it. I love the eagerness to contribute on this panel today. It's fun. I have two more questions. So we were kind of I heard this a lot in the networking hour before, so I do want to bring it to you all here, that when if we're not building the models ourselves, and if we're building just the application layer on top of it, or the harness, or whatever you want to call it, where is the actual moat here? What it actually matters when you're starting these businesses, you're founders, or you're investing in them. You might have proprietary patient data, but where is that moat? How are you protecting that proprietary nature? And to that end, I think this is an area of the moat no one wants. You could think about this too, but who owns the liability if you don't own that model, if you're building on top of it? And how are you thinking about that? You could take that in whichever way you want.
I can start on this one. So I've been in healthcare for a while. I saw as many of the big tech companies started entering the healthcare space, and I saw how the reaction was from healthcare incumbents when big tech sells to healthcare. And healthcare is such a we protect our own and we stay in the family kind of industry. So if you come from the healthcare industry, you want to have the outside perspective, but you don't want to have so much of the outside perspective. You feel more comfortable and there's more trust when you feel like the person that's selling to you has walked in your shoes and gets it and is not condescending to you and doesn't respect the experience that you've had. And I think that that is a really non-trivial moat today. If you deeply understand how your customer has walked, the experience that they have, they get it, it translates, they immediately, like, they visibly soften. At the company I was at previously, we were selling to like large payviders, and our founders were Canadian tech guys, and they would bring me in to help sell, you know, the CTO of HCA or these large hospital systems because I have worked in medical devices and in pharma, and so healthcare buyers want to hear from healthcare companies, and so I do really believe that domain expertise and respect for your customer is more valuable than ever, particularly when you can get a Me Too product out on the market like in a day. What matters is domain expertise, trust, credibility, and fundamentally human connection, actually. And so I really, in many ways, feel like we only amplified the need to build community and build connection with LLMs. That's only become more of a superpower for folks than it was before.
I cannot echo that enough coming from pharma. If somebody that came from tech and told me, and again, it goes back to egos, unfortunately, in human nature. And me as a PhD, and I apologize for the grand generalization, but PhDs tend to think that they're God's earth, you know, they're the gift and they know everything. Believe me, they fucking don't, because if we did, we had a lot more solutions out there. But the point is that if you have that bullshit credential selling to you, like if any of you are selling into pharma, selling into MDs, bring a person that can actually stand behind their words, because you just think that the person in front of you, and it's just reality and it's right in your face, they're an idiot because they haven't been through some of these things. So I wanted to like really stress that out, that if I wasn't selling my product to some other people, that was the biggest barrier. People are like, who the hell are you bringing in front of me? This guy doesn't know shit about anything. Anyway, just wanted to really make that point really strong.
I can add only one thing. I think in addition to being able to bring these stakeholders to the table, there's one overlooked component of like really building the trust, and there's that close collaboration with these entities. If the problem is mine, I can actually work very closely with a hospital and with a person who is actually in the space solving this. So instead of me actually starting from zero, building that relationship with the hospital and trying to have that close collaboration of like, hey, I propose this process of actually really addressing this significant pain point, hair on fire problem for you. Let's actually create a process in which we can actually obtain that result. So you get to see what I'm building evolve within your system, and you get that data and that trust as we actually move. You're going to make mistakes. You want to be able to make mistakes, but also have the ability to collaborate in like really rectifying those. If you are God and you're able to actually do everything perfectly, do it by yourself and then see what actually happens. But for me, it's really, there's a component of like silo working which needs to actually be a little bit reduced when it comes to addressing some of these healthcare problems. It's really close collaboration that actually helps a lot of companies open up those opportunities and build that trust, which is actually really needed from the clinical side. That is one thing. If the clinicians and the collaborators you're working with actually trust you and you have that foundation, it is much easier for them to advocate for your problem with patients and so forth. So you have to be mindful on how you navigate that process.
Okay, and then the last question from me, I'm going to give you two choices to keep us to time. You choose which one you like better, and we'll give it to all of you to answer. So either the first choice is, What does the next genuinely useful version of health AI look like, and what has to be true for that to exist? Or what's one question that I should have asked you today?
We're speechless.
I think that the most useful application eventually would be, and that is my absolute dream, is that each and every single person, or each and every, and again, that's under the assumption we're all going to be patients, will have the empowerment to be their own PhD in their own health, which means that right now, with the advent of these technologies, you can literally try to understand, you can go while you're healthy, sequence your genome, try to understand the germline, what you're inherited with, what is your trajectory, and try to intervene as early as possible in your health. Like, that is my absolute dream, and I think that's where everything eventually is going, because guess who has the motivation to save your life? With all due respect to medical doctors, the system, the incentives are not there to spend day and night on your health. It's just not possible. They have this amazing skill set to guide you through in 10, 20, 30, whatever minutes there are in the day, but they still have to make those billables, otherwise they're going to get kicked out. So I think that every single person in this room will have the capability of controlling, eventually, I don't know what timelines there, whether it's 50 years, 2 years, whatever the hell it is, but the point is, I think we're getting there.
Yeah, no, okay, so I'm agreeing with this 100%. Within the traditional medical architecture, there's always going to be a role for hospitals, payers, and kind of the traditional systems for invasive procedures, for things that need equipment that you're not going to have. Where I think the change is going to come from technology and consumerism is primary care, preventive care. All the information that goes into the decision making is going to move out of the silos, out into the wild, where there is no technical moat to any of the tools that are being built, because you're outside the FDA processes. But you can still come up with meaningful products that empower the patients to interpret their own data against the backdrop of their own lives, their own environmental factors, their own everything, and then make truly informed decisions, whether it's based on medical literature, guidelines, or unique genetic stuff. Like, being able to boil all that down from a swamp of crap no one wants to wade through to here's 3 insights that matter to you. And the key there is trust. Especially on the consumer side. There's a profound mistrust of all things institutional, all things healthcare, all things government right now. So being able to win that trust by providing insights that are valuable and true, I think that's how you win that space. And that's where we need to go. I don't know if I answered either of your questions, but.
I'll take the answer.
Yeah.
Fine, final 2.
You can go.
Okay. I think as a bottleneck that we see for many of our customers that are building healthcare AI software is their ability to access high-quality clinical evals. And when I say evals, I don't mean like a lot of folks are using like LLM as a judge with like Langfuse, and they're like, ship it, we're good, But I think in healthcare, if you're making an important decision that actually has to make a difference, like clinical decision support or a diagnosis, you need a much higher quality eval to compare against. And some of our customers have built that, but on our platform, but they were lucky to already have clinicians in-house to generate the evals for them. And so I see that as a big limiting factor, and it kind of speaks to Tim, your point on trust, is if you're able to get that sort of foundational data to be able to judge if something is correct or not, it really unlocks many use cases. One of the reasons why agentic coding is so addictive and so easy to ship stuff is we have a really easy way to check if something works. The server's up, or you can see a web app, right? Like, you can immediately tell if something is working. But in healthcare, you have to gather that information retrospectively, structure it, make it available, and have it make it easy for folks to gather that. And so that's an area that we're focused on investing in and making easier for our customers. And I think it's a huge unlock when companies do make an effort to focus on that.
So for my response, I think it will also echo a lot of what the other panelists have actually shared. And for me, it's really accessibility. I think for the longest time, healthcare has actually really been confined within the 4 walls of hospitals and clinics. But now we're actually in a place where as technology is actually continuously evolving, as AI is actually maturing, as we continue building, we are in a place where we're going to see that accessibility being really unlocked at not only like at a local scale, but at a global scale. And that's one thing that I would say that what universally like a quality healthcare looks like, it would be more accessibility at a global scale. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for your candid, impassioned takes today. I loved it. I hope you all did too. Let's give them a round of applause.